Hey guys, Eric Smith here, contributor on 5 Reasons Sports Network, also co-host of Scouting the Fins. And in today's video, I want to look at the question, has Chris Grier improved the Miami Dolphins roster? And this is not going to be a Chris Grier fluff video. I'm not going to sit here and try to say that Chris Grier is one of the top GMs in the NFL. What I do want to do, I want to take a look at the Dolphins roster every year from the tank year of 2019 through 2024. And we're going to look at each position through the years. And obviously, we're going to have some of my opinions throughout this, but I mostly want to share the results in a format that allows you to make your own determinations. So, what is the job of a GM? In my opinion, in simple terms, he is responsible for the talent that is put on the field. And similar to a head coach, a GM is only as good as the talent around him, which includes the coaches. It also includes scouts all around the country feeding him information on college players. It also includes an entire pro personnel division who's responsible for NFL players when it comes to things like free agency and trades. In an interview that Mike McDaniel did with Travis Wingfield, he was talking about the value of adding Bobby Slowick because Slowick was a coordinator that McDaniel had essentially trained to be in that position. The value was that McDaniel trained Slowick. Slowick understands exactly what Mike McDaniel is looking for in each position. We all know the Bill Parcells quote about if you're going to cook the meal, you should be able to shop for the groceries. And a good GM understands what that means. And not that Grier should let McDaniel and Anthony Weaver have the final decision at the register, but they should be part of that conversation. And Grier should be trying to get his coordinators the right ingredients for the meal they want to cook. And I think Chris Grier actually has a pretty good reputation for doing exactly that, but he needs to stop firing the damn chefs. This has been my main criticism of Grier over his time as a GM, that the coaching churn has directly resulted in the corresponding roster churn that comes with changing the play callers. I think that one place I would like to see more from Chris Grier is in his conviction to the players that were drafted and left to go other places on modest contracts. Andrew Van Ginkel is the obvious one. Even if it was Anthony Weaver who wanted Shaquille Barrett over AVG, there's no reason that Grier shouldn't have been able to put his foot down for the new defensive coordinator and tell him that we should explore with the homegrown talent in the same way they did with Mike Gesicki when Mike McDaniel arrived in town. Another example is letting Mac Hollins walk from Mike McDaniel's favorite in Trent Sherfield, who only lasted a season. To Chris Grier's credit, this is the first time in quite a while that they will return the same offensive and defensive coordinators from one year to the next. I'm hoping that we see the growth on both sides of the ball that supports that decision. This video is not going to have the best graphics. That's not my thing. We're not going to look through the roster and talk about failed draft picks. We're not going to look at bad contracts and the cap hits. We're not going to look at the injury history of these players. We aren't going to look at the records or the late season collapses. What we're going to do is use the percentage of snaps played each season. This data was taken from Pro Football Reference. And like I said from the top, the job of the GM is to be responsible for the talent that is put on the field. There's going to be some positions that you may feel improved every year, and then some that may have been more of a roller coaster. But my main objective here is for you to be able to eliminate some of the noise to specifically look at the talent that has been put on the field to try and win these games. I'm not sure if we're going to make it through the entire roster in this video. Might need to break it up into 2 videos depending on how well the first one does. But we're going to start with the offense, where we've finally seen a little stability in the coaching by having Mike McDaniel as the play caller for the fourth straight season. Right. For each of these positions, we're going to split the years between the Brian Flores and Mike McDaniel years. And while Grier is responsible for the talent that's placed on the field, the coaching staff has a significant impact on that. So in 2019, the quarterbacks were Ryan Fitzpatrick playing 81% and Josh Rosen at 18%. 2020 is when they draft Tua, right? Tua replaces Josh Rosen and plays a little more snaps than Ryan Fitzpatrick, so I think we can agree that's a clear upgrade over the previous year at the position. 2021, so Fitzpatrick is replaced by Jacoby Brissett, which from a talent perspective, 1-to-1 is a downgrade, but I think that you can consider it almost a wash when you look at Tua, jumping by 14% from 2020 to 2021. We didn't see as much of the backup quarterback. As we go to 2022, we replaced Jacoby Brissett with the combination of Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater, which Tua plays a very similar percentage of snaps. I think that going from Jacoby to Thompson and Bridgewater was basically a lateral, in my opinion. And then 2023, the backups, I would say, was essentially another lateral going from the combination of Thompson and Bridgewater to Mike White. We got the big jump in the percentage of snaps played by Tua. So when we look at what was on the field, I think that 2023 was by far the best of any years that we had during Chris Grier's time. 2024, in my opinion, this is yet another lateral in terms of the backup quarterbacks going from Mike White to Tyler Huntley. The big factor here being that Tua was injured again, and the percentage of snaps dropped drastically. As we go into 2025, kind of feel the same way. I think that Zach Wilson is yet another lateral of these backup quarterbacks. Maybe he has a higher ceiling than the guys that we've looked at before. But when we look at, if Tua suffers another concussion, goes on that 4-week IR, are you more confident in Zach Wilson winning more games over that span than the other guys that we've had? So I would not say that that is an upgrade, but I also don't feel that the position has really downgraded any year except for 2024, and that was a result of the health of Tua more than the personnel behind him. All right, next we're going to take a look at the running backs. And as you can see in 2019, that was the Patrick Laird, Kalen Ballage, and Kenyon Drake year. The following year, we had a complete overhaul in that room. I think Laird might have still been on the roster, but really didn't play at all. Instead, you had Myles Gaskin as a draft pick. You had Savon Ahmed and Matt Breida both coming over from the 49ers. I think that's a clear upgrade, even though it's still not a great running back room. Certainly better than Laird and Ballage. Heading into 2021, didn't have as much movement here. You had Duke Johnson added to the room, and Matt Breida was removed from the room. So I think that this was an improvement, just based on that minor change in your third running back. And then we get to 2022 when Mike McDaniel arrives, and again you see a complete overhaul of the room with Gaskin, Ahmed, Duke Johnson no longer either on the roster or getting significant snaps. Instead, you're replaced by Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Chase Edmonds, and then you got a fullback playing some significant snaps in Alec Ingold. So again, I would say that when you look at Mostert, Wilson, and Edmonds, that's a clear upgrade over Gaskin, Ahmed, and Duke Johnson. And then as we get into 2023, you see Devon Achane added, and he essentially replaces Chase Edmonds. Another clear upgrade in that room. And then while Jeff Wilson was still on the roster, his snaps really dropped off in 2024, and they were replaced by Jalen Wright. So, maybe that's a lateral in terms of the on-field production, but based on the upside of Wright, I would consider that a upgrade in the room. The running back room for 2025, I would say, is still incomplete. I think we got to see where Madison slots in along with Achane and Jalen Wright, who will be returners. Is Madison replacing the Raheem Mostert role? If it is, I think that's a downgrade. If he's replacing those minimal snaps that Jeff Wilson played in 2024, and there's another quality addition to the room, then it still could be another improvement. But this room, I think, is a good one to look at to show that every year since that tank year, this room has improved under Grier. All right, next we're going to take a look at the wide receiver room. So going back to 2019 again, the main contributors in the room were Devontae Parker, Allen Hurns, Albert Wilson, Preston Williams, and Isaiah Ford. Going to 2020, we see Hurns and Albert Wilson either no longer on the roster or taking significant snaps, and they're replaced by Jakeem Grant and Lynn Bowden Jr. Probably pretty much a lateral. None of those guys were, huge contributors one way or the other. In 2021, we see a bit of an overhaul of the room here. We see Isaiah Ford, Jakeem Grant, and Lynn Bowden all dropping off, and they are replaced by Jalen Waddle, the return of Albert Wilson, and Matt Collins. I think the addition of Jalen Waddle alone is significant enough to consider this an upgrade. But I think when you also look at what Matt Collins did over some of the other guys, I think that you can consider the room overall as a pretty good upgrade here in 2021. And then 2022, you obviously have a bit of an overhaul again, right? Devontae Parker leaves, Albert Wilson's done, Matt Collins, Preston Williams. You get Tyreek Hill, right? Right there, you are massively upgrading what that room was. You get Trent Sherfield, who was kind of a lateral from Matt Collins, Cedric Wilson Jr., and River Craycraft. Not really needle movers, but again, when you look at the addition of Tyreek Hill, this room was certainly upgraded in 2022. Moving along to 2023, room was pretty much the same. You go from Trent Sherfield to Braxton Berrios in terms of snaps, and you're really only looking at 41% for Berrios and 57% for Sherfield. I think Berrios gave a little more in terms of a wide receiver than what Trent Sherfield did, and they were different types of special teams players. Then going to last year, you had Malik Washington added along with Odell Beckham Jr., and then you lost Cedric Wilson and Braxton Berrios dropped off in terms of snaps played. Obviously didn't get much out of Beckham, but when you look at what you got and the potential with Malik Washington compared to the other two guys that were lost, I think you definitely had an upgrade there as well. As we look at the 2025 version, so you're returning the top three receivers off that roster, most likely, in Hill, Waddle, and Malik Washington. And then your fourth receiver is now Nick Westbrook-Akine, who is a massive upgrade over what River Craycraft and Odell Beckham Jr. is. So I think that this receiver room that we're looking at in 2025 is going to be clearly the best receiver room that we've had during Chris Grier's time with the Dolphins. All right, moving along, next room is the tight ends. In 2019, it was Mike Gesicki, Durham Smythe, and Nick O'Leary. In 2020, we see O'Leary replaced by Adam Shaheen. Both your third tight end. Wouldn't consider this much of a move either way. 2021, they run it back with that same room of Gesicki, Smythe, and Shaheen. In 2022, we see Shaheen replaced with Hunter Long. You also see Durham Smythe kind of taking over as the top tight end over Mike Gesicki. Again, this is Mike McDaniel's first year. And when you look at what Mike McDaniel's asking his starting tight end to do, you can kind of, even though Smythe hasn't been great or wasn't great, he was certainly a better blocker than what Gesicki was and a better fit for the McDaniel scheme. Going 2023, you see the departure of Mike Gesicki and Hunter Long. Durham Smythe hangs on. And you see Julian Hill and Tyler Kroft entering the room. And again, right, when you talk about fits in this system, I would consider Julian Hill an upgrade over what Mike Gesicki did, even though Gesicki is a better receiver. I think that in terms of this offense, if you gave me those two players side by side, even with the struggles that Hill has had, I would still take Julian Hill over Mike Gesicki. And then Hunter Long and Tyler Kroft, another third tight end wash. Last year, you obviously had Tyler Kroft dropping off the roster and Jonnu Smith emerging, right? Massive upgrade there when you look at how that roster looked in 2023 at tight end versus 2024 just based on that addition. Now, as we move into 2025, again, right, roster may still be incomplete, but even if the only move that you made was going from Durham Smythe to the newly signed Pharaoh Brown from the Seattle Seahawks, I still think that you can consider this an upgraded position from last year. We're going to wrap up the offensive side of the ball with everybody's favorite and probably the main reason that most people are on this channel, the offensive line. So going back to 2019, your top 8 offensive linemen were Michael Dieter, Jesse Davis, Daniel Kilgore, Evan Bain, Jamarcus Webb, Julian Davenport, Shaq Calhoun, and Danny Isadora. I'm not even sure that any of those guys are still in the NFL, even though most of them were pretty young in 2019. Moving to 2020, we had pretty much an entire overhaul with only Jesse Davis and Julian Davenport staying on the top 8. You lost Dieter, Kilgore, Bain, Webb, Calhoun, and Isadora, and they were replaced with what I would consider an upgraded group in Ted Karras, Eric Flowers, Adam Pankey, and then the draft picks of Austin Jackson, Solomon Kinley, and Robert Hunt. As we move into 2021, not as much turnover, but only there was a huge difference in the group. I mean, you're going from Karras, Flowers, Davenport, and Pankey moving off the roster, and they're replaced by, a similarly underwhelming group of Eichenberg, Dieter returning from injury, Austin Reiter, and Greg Manx, who were both signed late in the season to play center. Now, as we move into the McDaniel era, another overhaul here with Jesse Davis, Michael Dieter, Austin Reiter, Greg Manx, and Solomon Kinley no longer part of the plan, and they are replaced by center Connor Williams, swing tackle Brandon Shell, premier left tackle Teron Armstead, and then you got Greg Little and Rob Jones as backups. So I think that was a clear upgrade in 2022. In 2023, you don't have nearly as much movement. You drop Shell and Little, and they are replaced by Lester Cotton and Kendall Lamb. And while those aren't massive names, right, I do think that Cotton and Lamb are an upgrade in your reserves over Shell and Little. Then in 2024, we obviously move on from Lester Cotton. We lose Rob Hunt to free agency. We lose Connor Williams to both injury and free agency. They are replaced in the top 8 by Aaron Brewer, Patrick Paul, and Isaiah Wynn, who was on the roster before but didn't make it into the top 8 in terms of percentage of snaps played. So while that is a downgrade from particularly Hunt and Williams to Aaron Brewer and whoever else you want to combine that with, there's a little bit of unpredictability in losing Williams to injury when that would have been a player that probably would have received a significant contract had he been healthy to stay with the Dolphins. As we move into 2025 on the offensive line, you get the return of Austin Jackson, hopefully playing a higher percentage of snaps than what he did in 2024. You also get James Daniels, who is a massive upgrade over Liam Eichenberg at right guard on the roster. You also have the addition of Larry Borum, and whether that is as a backup or even as a starting left guard, I think that's no worse than a lateral from either Rob Jones or Liam Eichenberg. So while we haven't had the big addition outside of James Daniels, I think that addition alone is enough to say that we're probably going to see an upgraded version of the Dolphins offensive line in 2025. All right, so we're going to keep this to one video. We got through the offense a little faster than I thought I would, and I think a big reason for that is, like I said, I'm trying not to throw my opinion in there too much. I am, giving my thoughts here and there, but I do want you to be able to look at these names and make your own decisions as we're going through this. So moving on to defense, looking at the defensive tackles in 2019 was Christian Wilkins, Devon Godchaux, John Jenkins, and Zach Sealer. So that was actually a pretty solid room during that tank season. 2020, we have John Jenkins replaced by Raekwon Davis. I feel like they were both basically solid contributors. So more of a lateral there in terms of whether the room is better or worse. I think it was pretty much the same. And then a similar level lateral going into 2021 where we replaced Devon Godchaux with Adam Butler, who I felt had a solid year with the Dolphins. And then continuing the merry-go-round, we replace Adam Butler and go back to John Jenkins. Different style of players, but I think in terms of talent and contributions, pretty similar players. And then continuing that trend, we go from John Jenkins to Deshaun Hand, another solid player, but none of these guys are really moving the needle outside of your Wilkins and Sealer that we've had the whole way through. Then we get to last year, and we add Calais Campbell and Benito Jones, and they replace Christian Wilkins and Raekwon Davis. So even though Wilkins was originally viewed as a pretty massive loss, I think the Dolphins did a really good job of basically status quo with that room. Unfortunately, we don't know how long we're going to have Calais Campbell, but for 2024, I think they did a good job of keeping that talent level the same through Chris Grier's tenure. Now, 2025, they haven't done a whole lot with this room. It's obviously incomplete. If we had to play today, you couldn't even do it with the way the room is constructed today. So I'm not going to sit here and say it is a massive downgrade, still hoping to get Campbell back, but very much still a wait and see to see what they're going to do with this room in 2025. All right, as we move on to the edge room, your 2019 edges were Vince Beagle, Charles Harris, Taco Charlton, and Avery Moss. Quite the group you had there. In 2020, you get a full overhaul. The new room is Kyle Van Noy, Emmanuel Ogbah, Shaq Lawson, and Andrew Van Ginkel. Definitely an upgrade there. 2021, you go from Kyle Van Noy and Shaq Lawson to Jalen Phillips and Brennan Scarlett. I think you can view that as a clear upgrade from one year to the next. And then in 2022, you move on from Ogbah and Brennan Scarlett, and they're replaced with Bradley Chubb and Melvin Ingram. Again, I think in terms of talent, that was a definite improvement there. And then in 2023, you don't bring Melvin Ingram back. You see the return of Emmanuel Ogbah. That's the only change in the room. Ogbah is a better player than Melvin Ingram was in his time with Miami, so another improvement there. And then in 2024, get a bit of an overhaul again. Bradley Chubb doesn't play at all, so he's not on there. Move on from Andrew Van Ginkel, and Jalen Phillips barely plays. They're replaced by Chop Robinson, Quentin Bell, and Tyus Bowser. So clearly a massive downgrade in terms of what you had on the edge there. But, this is one of those positions I think requires context. You're getting Bradley Chubb back in 2025 on a revised contract with over a full year of recovery. You get Jalen Phillips. Hopefully he has another full recovery and doesn't have any more freak accidents. So when you look back over that group, in our 2025 group of what should be Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, and Quentin Bell returns as well, 2025, if everybody can stay healthy, is going to be the most talented group we've had in the edge room during Chris's tenure. And then our off-ball linebackers, so top three guys in 2019 were Jerome Baker, Sam Eguavoen, Raekwon McMillan. In 2020, we see Raekwon McMillan replaced by Landon Roberts, both similar type of players. Roberts a very good fit in that Flores scheme, so I'd consider that an upgrade there. The following year, you bring back Baker and Roberts. You replace Eguavoen with Duke Riley. And while Duke Riley hasn't done a whole lot on the field, I do think that his special teams contributions, you can consider him an upgrade over Sam Eguavoen. The following year, 2022, they run that room back exactly as it was with Boyer still as the defensive coordinator. 2023, you see in the Vic Fangio scheme, Landon Roberts is replaced by David Long, who has a very good year. So two good players, but fits for different schemes. So based on the scheme that was here, I think that David Long, could be considered an upgrade. And then in 2024, they move on from Jerome Baker. You don't see Duke Riley playing as much, and that's because you bring in Jordan Brooks, and then you have Anthony Walker and Tyrell Dodson. Think that was definitely an upgrade in 2024 over 2023. As you move forward to 2025, going to be a similar room. Brooks is still going to be your number one. Dodson is still going to be in the mix there. You have KJ Britt, who I think is an upgrade over Anthony Walker. I'm kind of excited about what he brings in terms of the early down run stuffing, kind of going back to the Landon Roberts type player. So to be seen, not a massive change in the room there, but I don't think it's going to be any worse than it was in 2024. All right, we're not going to do specialists, so we're going to wrap this up with the defensive backs. And back in 2019, it was Eric Rowe, Nick Needham, Jamal Perry, Bobby McCain, Adrian Colbert, Stephen Parker, and Xavier Howard. As we move on to 2020, you see Perry, Colbert, and Parker leaving. They're replaced by Byron Jones, Brandon Jones, and Noah Igbenogany. You can agree that was certainly an upgrade over 2019. As we go to 2021, you see Bobby McCain and Noah Igbenogany no longer part of that defensive back room, or at least part of the significant snaps, replaced by Javon Holland and Justin Coleman. Holland did show potential in that 2021 season, so I don't feel like anybody was missing Bobby McCain, and the switch from Igbenogany to Coleman is essentially a wash. So I don't think the room got any worse in that year. The following year, you've got Byron Jones having the weird injury, never returns to the lineup. You also move on from Justin Coleman, and they're replaced by undrafted free agent Kader Kohu and Keon Crossan, who was supposed to be more of a special teams guy. So definitely a downgrade from what we expected from Byron Jones to Kader Kohu on the field. Crossan to Coleman, I think that one there is a wash. Looking at 2023, we move on from Eric Rowe and Keon Crossan, replaced by Deshaun Elliott and Eli Apple. I think that was essentially a wash. Elliott had a good year, so for that reason, you could consider this one an upgrade over Eric Rowe. Eli Apple, Keon Crossan, both guys you don't want to see on the field, so I consider that one a wash. And then you go to last season, and we get a bit of an overhaul in the secondary where you move on from Deshaun Elliott, Xavier Howard, Eli Apple, and Brandon Jones. And those are replaced by Jordan Poyer, Kendall Fuller, Storm Duck, and Marcus May. Overall, I think both of those groups, both leaving and incoming, maybe outside of Deshaun Elliott, were pretty disappointing groups. So I'm not sure if there was a whole lot of movement in terms of, did the room improve or get worse. 2025, we saw some new safeties brought in Melifonwu, as well as Ashton Davis. Still to be determined what they're going to do in the cornerback portion of it, but based on the safety play that we had with Poyer and Holland, I think there's a good chance that we're going to see an upgrade in terms of the on-field performance from the defensive backs in 2025. I had one post-recording note that I realized that I missed, and that was going from the 2022 season to the 2023 season, that Nick Needham was not part of the top 7 defensive backs in 2023, and he was replaced by a massive upgrade in Jalen Ramsey that has been part of the roster since then. All right, back to the top here. Like I said, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Chris Grier has done a phenomenal job. I do think that Miami tried to mimic the Rams' F those pick strategy and get some quick postseason success, and that was obviously a failure. But I don't think that it should undo the more progressive improvements to the roster that, at least in my opinion, have occurred over Grier's tenure. Despite all the changes in the coaching staffs and philosophies, I don't see many position groups that have taken a significant step backwards from one year to the next. Winning a Super Bowl is hard, and we saw the impact of that in the Rams roster after their quick victory, to the point that McVay almost stepped away from coaching. The Eagles have done something very similar and are robbing Peter to pay Paul. For them, it also worked out. I'd trade the $90 million in dead cap they have coming in the very near future for a single Dolphins Super Bowl victory. But what if it didn't work? And Howie Roseman still has an uphill battle to sustain that success. He has amassed a treasure chest of draft picks, but the draft is never a guaranteed thing. You're entitled to your own opinions, obviously, but for me, I would have understood why Miami moved on from Grier if they did, but I also would have preferred a complete teardown, including the coaching staff, if it reaches that point. If you have listened to me for any length of time, you probably know that I'm on the optimistic side of fans. And while I'm fully aware that this season largely hangs in the balance of whether or not Tua can stay healthy or not, I'm still looking forward to what a season can look like where both offense and defense can return with the same scheme in consecutive years. And of course, don't forget that the one move that all fans were united in was the firing of special teams coordinator Danny Crossman. As always, appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to leave a comment below. Do you feel that Grier has done a solid job of maintaining and improving the roster over his time, even if we haven't seen the postseason success that we obviously all want? Has this video done anything to change how you view Grier's time with the Dolphins? And of course, want to say anything else, feel free to. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for watching.